But what you may not know is that there are laws that have been passed in Massachusetts and Nevada that basically say if you're collecting information about a resident of one of those states, you're subject to provide a certain level of security for protecting what's known as personally identifiable information. And I'll get into what that is specifically in just a moment. But so if you have a client that is in Massachusetts or Nevada, or one of your clients has a beneficiary that you have information about that's in Massachusetts or Nevada, or if you're a service provider for a company with clients in Massachusetts or Nevada, you're subject to these regulations. So there's a good chance most advisors out there, with any number of clients, is going to, one way or another, be subject to these laws. Besides just being subject to those laws, you also want to protect your own clients from identity theft. That would be pretty horrible if that happened. Someone had their identity stolen because of a breach of one of your systems. You also want to protect your own business from malfeasance. Some breaches occur from disgruntled employees or less than reputable third parties, and so you have to vet your service providers as well. And there's it's only a 4-page document from Massachusetts, and you really need to read this. There are it's written in a pretty plain language as far as legislation goes. I was actually pretty surprised, but there's some things in here that may surprise you about what you're required to do. You're required to train your employees. You're required to impose disciplinary measures if they violate these rules. You're required to vet your service providers and have them agree to follow similar rules that you're subject to protect private information. So you really need to read that. The link to it is at the end of the presentation if you download the slides. So when I mentioned personally identifiable information, it's a very specific set of details about one or more person that can be used to specifically identify that person. And Massachusetts and Nevada both define it the same way, and some other rules define it this way as well. It basically amounts to first name or first initial of the person, their last name, and then any one of those other pieces of information listed there: social security number, driver's license number, or any financial account, credit card, debit card number. And it doesn't even need to include the PIN, just the account number. So all of the security measures that I'm going to talk about in the rest of the webinar here are really meant to protect PII, this sort of information. So I have a couple of slides here about some of the highlights of that Massachusetts legislation. You can see them here, but you really need to go read it for yourself. This is basically some of the administrative things you need to do, what kinds of things you need to do. And they have a whole section specifically as relates to computer systems and how you need to secure those. And it's very detailed and prescribes exactly the measures you need to take, and some might not be obvious.